Hey everyone, it's Raghu and I'm back with Mindrolling, a new episode. And this is an intro to this episode as it emanates from this wonderful retreat we just finished in Boone, North Carolina, right in the midst of the Blue Ridge Mountains. And we're still got a glow on because it was from that retreat. It was phenomenal. Of course, Krishna chanting at night. And we had East Forest, who was doing his wonderful music renditions of this music he created with Ram Dass years ago, before Ram Dass passed. And I want to introduce, of course, I think many of you know Bob Thurman, and Bob was there. And Bob is, for those of you who don't know, his biggest claim to fame is being a good friend of His Holiness, the Dalai Lama. And, of course, Bob taught at Columbia University for years around Tibetan Buddhist studies and so on. Retired a number of years ago. And he teaches around the country and has spent time with us. We are fortunate. He's just a brilliant, brilliant man, and funny and warm and engaging. We love Bob. And Nina Rao, who is there as well. And Nina does wonderful renditions of the Hanuman Chalisa, and really tells a story of Ramayana, from the Ramayana. She is very, very closely connected with that tradition. And I did a podcast, because I always do a live podcast at these retreats, fortunately. And I had Bob and Nina on, and it was about the intersection, as you'll see, depending if you're watching on YouTube, of Buddhism and Bhakti. And it's a wonderful, wonderful source of what I feel has been the reality for us since we were in India with Maharaj-ji all those years ago, and what got brought back into, most especially, of course, by Ram Dass, and then later on by Krishna Das, into this community. And it really is, as I say in the discussion on stage, it's about bhakti, the devotional aspect of who we are as human beings, love, compassion, kindness. Bhakti being how we merge with that which is the beloved, and that comes in many different forms. And at the same time, it's mixed with discriminating wisdom, which the Buddhists so wonderfully put forth in their perspective, in their philosophy. And Bob really does represent that. So it's a wonderful combination. I wanted to kind of get at it a little bit more in detail, related to how this offering has come forth after all these years. So here it is. Bob Thurman, Nina Rao, and myself from Boone, North Carolina. And we'll see you next time. Bob Thurman?
No. Not me. Nina Rao.
Nina Rao, yeah.
Nina Rao. Nina Ma. And Raghu. Raghu Das.
So I'm going to say a few things to start it off, but I wanted to talk about the intersection of Bhakti and Buddhism and how that is represented in our lineage of Neem Karoli Baba and Ram Dass. So I had a whole elaborate idea in mind, and then I thought of a friend of mine who is with us today, but not here. And when we were talking about the intellectualization of what it was that we brought back from India, that came back with us, rather. And he said, you know, it's just about pooris and potatoes. That's what our thing is, pooris and potatoes. When we arrived in Kenchi, we were fed huge amounts of greasy fried potatoes and wonderful.
I'm going to ask the question so that to prompt him to tell the story about the puris and potatoes. This is a great story about how when they accidentally saw Krishna Das, saw Maharaj-ji, when they were looking for Maharaj-ji, but if it hadn't been for one person on the bus, and then, but I want him to tell the story. Hang on, Renu. And then what happened and how Maharaj-ji was already, he already knew.
So the bus was going to Delhi that Ram Dass had hired. There was 25 odd people. Every time, whoever tells this story, every time there's a different number. So,
I did learn that.
Yeah, right. So they got to sort of a fork in the road where they could go. You guys probably heard of the Kumbh Mela that happened in India this year, right? So there had been one, but it was past the time when the people were still there. There was some people there, but not the multi-millions. And Ram Dass is thinking, gee, if we go straight to Delhi, I can take a bath and get some ice cream, And then somebody else said, well, if we go into Allahabad, or actually to the, what's it called there? The Sangam, where the Yamuna, the Ganga, and the underground Saraswati meet. I've been there. It's really nice. So again, Ram Dass is thinking, should we go that way or this way or that way? And finally, they decide to go to the Sangam, and they went, and somebody, I think Danny Goleman said, yeah, there's this Hanuman, a special Hanuman Murti statue that's lying down in the temple. Let's go there. So they went there. As they are getting really close to the temple, Rameshwar Das, it was he, who said, oh, there's Maharaj-ji. They had, out of the blue.
I can't even imagine that moment that somebody could, one person on the bus, like, oh, there's Maharaj-ji. Like, you've been searching for this person for months. And then,
yeah. So they pile out of the bus and pranam, and he says, follow. He's with an Indian man, turned out to be Dada Mukherjee. He said, okay, follow us. We're going to take you into town. So they go to Dada's house, and they get there, and there's this, incredible meal in front of them with puris and potatoes and some sabji as well. And then somehow, I think somebody said, we've been waiting for you. And then the story was that Maharaj-ji got them up at like 5 a.m. and said, there's 26 Westerners coming for lunch today. And they had worked all these hours to prepare this extraordinary meal.
Plus one for the driver.
One for the driver, too, yeah. But the best example of puris and potatoes is one of us Westerners came for the first time, and he sat down, and we had all finished eating, and they gave him some puris and potatoes. He ate them for about, this is not an exaggeration, 3 hours this guy was eating. I mean, that he didn't die in doing it. They used to feed us so much. In fact, one time somebody came, Maharaj-ji, some of these Westerners are getting sick. What should we do? He said, if they get sick, take them to the hospital. They just kept feeding, and we understood there was a way in which that food, aside from complete sustenance on all levels, not just physical, but obviously spiritual plane, it also served as a way to buffer the energy that was going on there so that we could stay somewhat grounded at that time. So puris and potatoes, that was a huge thing for us. And Maharaj-ji was all about nothing but feed people. Love everyone, serve everyone, remember God. And he exemplified that. But next story, which you have heard from Krishna Das, I think you've heard too, I know you have. One day, Krishna Das, we were in Vrindavan and we were not supposed to be coming. Maharaj said, he said, don't come, you needn't want to be bothered, whatever. And Krishna Das knocks on my door and says, you got to help me get to the ashram. I said, why, what's up? And he said, my knee is completely out. He had a basketball knee. He used to play basketball. I said, okay. And I'm thinking, wow, maybe they'll let us in. This is great. And not thinking about poor Krishnadas, who's in a bunch of pain. So we got him there, and we went inside. And of course, the first thing, Maharaj-ji looked at us, and the first thing he said, he looked at me and he went, you're such a good person. You brought your friend here and you're helping him. And I'm thinking, holy shit. He, of course, knows that all I cared about was me getting there to have the darshan. Forget Krishnadas. And then he got up with the translator that was with him and was walking around the courtyard. And Krishnadas turned to me and said, I bet he's going to take this pain from me and he's going to fix it. And sure enough, Maharaj-ji starts to limp around a little bit, and then Krishnadas suddenly feels a whole lot better. Maharaj-ji comes back, didn't say a word about it, and Krishnadas, who's told this story a little bit the other night, he had his diary there, and in that diary, he had a passage, a Buddhist passage. I thought it was Mahamudra, but I think he explained it a little bit more detail. I don't remember what the title of that part of the Mahamudra was. So Maharaj-ji asked the translator to translate it so he could understand it. And so he did a paragraph or something, and Maharaj-ji went, teak, right on. Wow. Krishnadas was all uptight that he was using Buddhist methodology and philosophy in the midst of, because we didn't know anything there. We knew nothing. So then he flipped the page, and there was a picture of Maharaj-ji, who said, who's that? And we went, funny, you're trying to joke? Of course it's you. And he went, nay, Buddha. From that day on, at least for me and many others, because many of us have taken and still do taken Tibetan teachings from different Rinpoches and so on. And I remember back, this is something you may not know, that whenever he would talk about beings that really radiated the truth, that's the only way I could put it, a lot of it was Rinpoches. Kalu Rinpoche at the time, who was well known, and many the Rinpoches that were in Bodh Gaya there. And that happened throughout these decades. That has been part of our path, just naturally. Of course, we all at that time went to Vipassana courses. And is it not true that His Holiness would have monks train in Vipassana at some point?
It's normal, but it's a little different kind of Vipassana.
Yeah.
But it's normal.
And then Ram Dass ended up in Maui in 2004-05. And we decided to start having retreats. This retreat we're having right now is an outgrowth of that. But from the very beginning, and it seemed like this is how Ram Dass wanted it to take place, he wanted to have the teachers be there that were his friends from all of those, from that long time ago. Bob being one of them. And a lot of his friends were Buddhists. They weren't Hindu. It was weird. So they started teaching. And then we started realizing, because there was a great interplay with Ram Dass and Buddhist teachers. Whenever he would say soul, he'd look over at Bob and go, just like shyly, sorry, I'm saying soul. I know there's no soul. And so this dialogue would start to take place about that, which Bob will elucidate on. And my own take on it in terms of what we represent and what goes on here is really, truly a combination of bhakti and discriminating wisdom represented by Buddhist perspective. And that's been it for a long time now. You know, certainly when, as I say, it's from 2005, it's 20 years that this has been going on, except for a year or so with COVID. So I want to start actually with you, Bhakti. So Nina, who I met quite a long time ago, mid-90s, I think we met, and I have spent nice times with her, we have, in India, where she met her guru, Siddhima. And we have not talked much about Siddhima in this retreat. And I think this is an opportunity, if we could get you to just give us a little bit of that relationship with you and Ma.
Actually, I was just having a conversation about who you call your guru and who is a guru, and why would you need to even name a being as your guru? And it just comes from, and I do call my guru Siddhima for sure, but I realize now when I look back on my life that as a seeker, I didn't know of a form that I wasn't necessarily looking for a being in a human form. I was searching for and longing for that presence that we feel when you hear a name of a divine being or you see an image that evokes that feeling inside of you. And just now when you were talking about the intersection of bhakti and discriminating wisdom, as I think about it, I actually don't see any difference. And so I mentioned this earlier when I met Bob Thurman, that I asked him, "Who is your guru?" I asked you this long time ago, and you were quiet, and you said everyone.
Say what?
You said everyone. I believed him. But what I wanted to say is that when I met Krishnadas and I started chanting, I heard his chanting for the first time. It brought back to me this feeling I had as a child. And I think we've all had that in some way. We're all spiritual beings. We're all on a path, and we're all trying to live in the best way that we can. And I didn't realize that I was looking for a guru until Krishnadas started talking about Neem Karoli Baba. And so when I heard about him and I felt that presence that came alive when Krishnadas was talking about Maharaj-ji, I wanted to meet him. And up until that point, I had my exposure to gurus were mostly not good in India, because there are a lot of fake gurus, and often people are warned about gurus, like don't fall into a trap of. And so, in fact, even when I first started singing with Krishnadas, my parents were in India. And when I told them that, I was starting to chant with this guy, his name is Krishnadas, they said, "Well, is it a cult?" That was the first thing they said. They weren't sure. I said, no, you got to see this guy. He wears a T-shirt. It's not like that, you know? And I said, you should see the people who come to this. They're like just regular people who go to work every day and they come and they find something here, a sense of peace. So, nevertheless, I did want to go to Kenchi because when I learned that Maharaj-ji wasn't in the body anymore, I thought that if I went to the place where all these guys had been, because by then I started reading Ram Dass and I learned about people like Raghu and Rameshwar Das and all the people in that Nainital High photograph. And I'd met Radha and, you know, people like so. And it was only when I said I was going, and you know, he usually Krishnas will say, you don't have to go to India unless you want to get dysentery. But you can't say that to an Indian, so I got to go. So he said, then if you're going, go during Navaratri time, which is the 9 nights celebration of the goddess. A very deeply devotional, prayerful time that many Indians celebrate. And he said, there you will meet Siddhima. And that was the first time I had heard anything about her. And there was one photograph that showed up later, you know, of her holding Maharajji's arm when they're walking. Like, that was all I had seen. And so I thought, oh, maybe she'll be my guru. Like, I had this idea in my head when I went. So we arrived, and I recognized that just doing pilgrimage, like trying to find the source of where this kind of presence might be coming from, that is the path, that's a spiritual path. And we can do that in so many ways. But I remember this going up into the hills. Kenchi is up in the foothills of the Himalayas. Tenzin's been there also, to Almora and different places where Anandamayi Ma was. And we came around the bend, and there I saw that Kenchi. And I had seen that photograph, you know, all these people had talked about this place. I saw the bridge. I walked across the bridge, and I'm thinking I'm in heaven. And we go into the temple, and we're told, okay, you can stay for 3 nights. This is what the office told us. So we said, all right, well, we'll stay for 3 nights, and then we'll go to Nainital and go stay at the Evelyn Hotel, which is what they did. So I go into the temple, and we hadn't met Siddhima yet. And finally, we were called for darshan. And I really had this idea that I would see her, and I would be struck by a bolt of lightning, and everything would change instantly for me. And it wasn't like that. We were already feeling very ecstatic being there, but I walked into the room where she was sitting with Jivantima, who was her companion, and her nature, as I think back on it now, is clear and translucent. And I didn't see her. I saw Maharajji's presence with her sitting inside of it. And we had a casual exchange, and we said, you know, can we do some seva? And she said, well, the best seva you can do is, because she knew we had been sent by Krishna Das, so she said, best seva you can do is chant. Go sit with the kirtanwalas, sing with them, and then at 4 o'clock later on in the afternoon, you can sing Hanuman Chalisas. This was a little bit later, but she said, sit with the kirtanwalas. So that was enough for us. We sat, we sang Hare Krishna from morning till night, had so many puris and potatoes, lots. And then the 3rd day came around. So we were ready to pack up our stuff and leave, and we hadn't talked to Ma about anything, you know. It was 6 o'clock in the morning, and Jaya, so Jaya is our spiritual sister who took care of Siddhima for 37 years until she left the body in 2017. So she was the translator for all the Westerners who came until I came along, and when I could speak, some amount of Hindi, I became the translator, and Jaya would run away, luckily for me. And Jaya was knocking on the door. And I said, "What's the matter?" And she said, "Ma didn't even let me have tea." She said, hurry up, they're packing. Tell them they don't have to leave. And they can stay as long as they like." And it was a small gesture, but in that moment, I understood that she knew everything that I wanted, whatever it was that I was yearning for, and she was going to give it to me. I understood that. It's something that you feel inside of you. And that hasn't changed in all the years that I went back to see her, which was about 19 years before she left the body in 2017. And the thing to remember about Siddhima is that she never claimed to be a guru or a saint. She never, almost in the same way that Maharaj-ji would tell everybody to go away, she welcomed us and she didn't ask us for anything. If we had a question, she would say, "Maharaj-ji said." I don't know anything, but Maharaj-ji would say, "Do this." If we had a problem with our families, she would say, "Pray to Maharaj-ji." Everything was offered up to him. But over the years that I spent with her, the way in which she interacted with us with so much care and love, and just watching her, I think this was the greatest gift of all, is her generosity and her kindness and her impeccable clarity in any situation is really what was, I think, the most helpful for us. She said very little. She didn't give discourses about anything. She didn't want to have her picture taken. She didn't want to have film taken of her. She didn't want to have her voice recorded. Everything was very much kept quiet under the anchal, as they call it, which is what women wear. But by being in her presence, we got to understand what it's like to be a devotee. And I think that was her greatest gift to all of us, devoted to the Guru that lives inside. She often said, there was a time when I had fallen in love with the person that I married eventually, who had a different Guru. And so I had a whole thing in my mind about, well, I don't know if it's going to work. How are we going to split our time, all that stuff. And I was nervous to ask her anything. But so we go into the temple, I have about 15 people with me, and I'm introducing all the Westerners to her, and we sit down. And in the years before that, she'd never asked me a question about my personal life. And I went to pranam to her, and she looks at me and she says, "Why aren't you married?" Just like that. And I hadn't thought of asking, I hadn't asked her the question yet. And I said, "Ma, actually, I do want to talk to you about it, but not here." And then she said, before I could say anything, I went to bow to her like this, and she hit me on the head. And she said, "Remember, there's only one Guru. Only one Guru." And so she answered the ridiculous question that I had, and at the same time made it possible for me to explore all the teachings from all the traditions, because I grew up around the world. I went to Catholic schools. I sang hymns to Jesus when I grew up, and I loved them. I lived in Thailand, and I went to Buddhist temples. I grew up in India. We did puja at home. And all of it feels just like the intersection of grace. And she allowed that for that to happen for me. And I'm not a sort of a traditional Indian woman in the way I conduct my life. But it didn't matter. She welcomed everyone. And the way in which she connected with us was so... I mean, there were times I was going through a very difficult time, for example, and I sent a letter to her and I said, I'm worried about something. And she said, don't worry. We are praying for you here. We are praying for you here. So if she can say that, that's what I have to do too. So everything she did was a model for me. And I feel like in the smallest of ways, everything was sacred. Nothing was wasted. Every effort had a reason behind it. If you were preparing food, you prepare it as prasad. You make sure that there's enough for everyone. Feed everybody. Take care of everyone. Be kind. There were simple things, but they were the highest teachings, honestly. And the main thing, and I'm just saying things that are coming to my mind quickly, is it felt, for her, it was very important that her guidance for us was that practice was a very important thing. Because in the practice, we would find the answers to our questions. Because there would be a time when she wouldn't be there for us to ask the questions. So how do we trust in our choices? We learn to trust what's going on inside. And that's been what I carry with me.
Beautifully said. Wonderful. Bob?
What?
I can't forget all of those, the wonderful times we've had with Ram Dass when you would come and how, I mentioned before how he would be shy about talking about souls, and he would be wanting to not offend the Buddhist in any one of us. He was so kind that way. Meanwhile, you or Jack Cornfield or Sharon, whoever was...
No, I don't agree with him.
Eh?
He was happy because I don't agree with that. There's no soul in Buddhism. Neither does the Dalai Lama. I think you may be missing that point. When Mark Epstein told him that I could help him out about the issue about no soul and soul, I explained to him that, of course, Buddhists have a soul. It's just a selfless soul, just like a person is selfless. And what that means when you're selfless, like we see Siddhi Ma was selfless. She was there for other people. That means it doesn't mean she didn't have a self, but it meant that she doesn't have a rigid, fixed, separated self. The conventional Buddhists will go on and on about anatma as if that was a dogma, but it's not a dogma. It's the same process as you find in the Upanishads, where when Indra talks to Yajnavalkya in the Upanishad, and he says, who do you think you are? He says to Indra, who is the king of the gods, well, I'm Indra. He says, no, you're not. Well, I'm a god. No, you're not. I'm a this. No, you're not. I'm a that. No, you're not. Finally, you are ultimately you're one with God. You're God, not just a regular personality God, in other words. So the Buddhists, so the only people in ancient India who didn't have a soul were a group of people called the Charvakas, who are like modern Americans. There's no future life. This is just a random eat, drink, and be merry because tomorrow you die, and all that spiritual stuff is ridiculous because nobody exists really, And but that's not the Buddhists. The Buddhists, even the Theravada Buddhists, but that's a simplistic thing that people thought about Buddhism. Modern people did because it seemed to agree with the nihilism of modern culture. Because in modern culture, you're told that your mind is an epiphenomenon of your brain, and when your brain stops working, that's the end of you. So in a way, it's not only that you don't have a soul, you don't really have a mind even. So therefore, you're just supposed to work in the factory. You're supposed to do whatever they tell you to do. But that's not Buddhism. And that's why Ram Dass was happy after all the years to connect with me, and I told him that he shouldn't listen to this thing about how he's not supposed to have a soul. Of course he does. And he'll be reborn. Of course he will. He may have been thinking that he will join the one and he will disappear somewhere, because that tends to be a way people will misunderstand enlightenment. The purpose of enlightenment is to get away from everybody. Oh, no, we don't want to chant. We don't want to hang out with you. We want to leave and go somewhere. And that makes us holy and something like that.
Can I ask you a question
and
about
this
that?
is why the female is the wisdom. Because she knows that you have to take care of business. Be here now is a woman's mantra. Because the woman is there. She has to take care of things. She knows when the cat is hungry, when the dog needs to be walked. She knows the guy.
You know that
the
too.
guy wants to get away from it all the time. Yeah.
All right, we have a question. Go ahead.
I have a question
Yes,
about this. So in many of our practices in India, the idea of liberation
Yes.
is to be freed from the cycle of birth and death. This is how it's phrased often.
Well, that's a simplistic way.
Okay, so that's what I wanted to ask
That's
you.
a simplistic thing.
Yeah.
In other words, what is birth and what is death? Birth in a world where you are separate from everybody else, and you are outnumbered by everybody else, and you are only concerned for yourself, supposedly. Look out for number one. Isn't that a watchword in our culture? Take care of number one. And then that's a hopeless situation, because nobody else is going to take care of you, and you can't conquer even your president of the United States. And what good is that doing anybody, including you, when you only know about yourself and you're only there for yourself? So there's the birth and death of a selfish, ignorant person is the problem. And initially, in the time of Buddha and the Upanishads, people were mainly trying to reinforce individuals from just sort of following their caste duty, and women from just being slaves in the household and bearing children, with the men in charge of everything, and realizing that every individual, male or female, at any caste, had a potential of fulfillment as a living being, fully alive, fully aware, fully loving, fully beloved, and knowing everything, fully wise. And so they got out of karma yoga in a way. I'm referring to the Gita. They got out of the karma yoga, which Arjuna was put into in the part of the Gita, which was he was a warrior, so he had to fight. But actually what karma yoga really meant also in the Vedic period before that was karma. The word for karma meant a ritual. So karma yoga was to feed offerings to the gods to appease them so they would benefit you in life. So karma was not necessarily ethical action. It was ritual action. That's what it actually meant. And in a way, he was doing a ritual of being a warrior, because Krishna showed him that time takes care of everything anyway, and God takes care of it. So he shouldn't feel guilty that he's killing his friends, just to get one bad guy, So that's one part of the Gita. But the bigger part of the Gita, then, the two bigger parts, the second one is Jnana Yoga, where when you understand the universe, you will find that you are actually free in the universe. And then the highest one, the way that the Krishna of the Gita said, was loving God, Bhakti Yoga. And for that to have meaning, well, you didn't love the Vedic gods, actually. They all mix Vedas and they say Veda, Veda. But actually the Veda gods were not actually lovable. They were scary. And you fed them through the ritual to keep them off your back. And then suddenly Krishna changes and he's lovey-dovey lover boy Krishna. And the greatness of Indian spirituality actually was, in that level, that you could love him totally. And Krishna was a lover, literally, so all your energies, even your sensual energies, could be focused on the divine, which is unique in Indian religion, in the Western religion, and also in the earlier monasticism. The sensual stuff has to be suppressed. And then supposedly there's some pure something somewhere, you know. So be here now is what women naturally are. And they realize that's reality. And it's the guy who's always running around away because he doesn't want to wash the dishes. And he doesn't want to know what's going on. So he makes visions of nirvana as if it's some other place. And Buddha allowed that because otherwise they wouldn't have, no one could believe that you could be in the midst of here and be completely free of suffering. It's not birth and death, it's suffering that you want to be afraid of. And that's what you want to be free of. So in Ram Dass's case, our later relationship, actually I was thinking about your stories about first meeting him and everything. Yeah. And that year, 1971, when you guys were running around with Ram Dass in the Uttarakhand, I was also right there. Yeah. I was there with a Volkswagen, with my beloved third guru, my Nina, and 2 babies, and Uma was at the breast. The little baby Kill Bill Uma was, she was sucking at the breast. And so we were sort of preoccupied, and we weren't sort of looking for a guru, and we had Dalai Lama over there, you know, and a bunch of other lamas. So we saw Maharaj-ji, and we saw how nice it was. And I personally was really pleased that the guy I had known as the sort of super hip, super smart Harvard professor, taking small doses of psilocybin and feeding it to other people to see how they did so he could make a psychological study, that he was actually finding spirituality thanks to this great guru. That was how I saw it, you follow me? And that's how I don't have a story about seeing him, except I saw the nice guy down there cross the bridge from the road in Kasani in his blankie. And Nina particularly liked that because Nina always had a blankie. She was a blankie walla, totally. You know, everybody had to have a blankie, you know. Where's the blankie? That was always the story, you know. So that's the thing. And it's just India, you know, the 3 yogas, Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga. And the Bhakti Yoga, there's the ism of Hinduism and Buddhism and Vedism are really irrelevant. You have to look at the actual thing that they're doing. And the greatness of Hinduism ends up being not really the Vedas, it ends up being the lovable gods. And even Shiva, you know, Shiva was not lovable in the Vedas. He was called Rudra. And Rudra was like what it sounds like, rude. And that's why they end up saying Shiva the destroyer, you know. But actually later on, Shiva's not the destroyer. Actually, there's a great story. Since you guys have stories, I'll tell that story. Shiva got really mad at all the gods and even at the whole universe when his beloved Parvati threw herself into the fire, which was the ritual fire, kind of a symbol of the breaking from the Vedas to the liberation, adding liberation to the menu, life menu, you know. And he wasn't invited to the Feast of the Gods, you know, to the party, because he was too funky. He was a yogi. He had matted locks. He had serpents in his hair. He was smeared with human bone ashes. His third eye was hot as a laser beam. And the main gods were having a nice barbecue there, and they invited his wife, who was the daughter of one of the main gods.
His wife was Sati at the time. Sati, right?
Yeah, they didn't invite him.
No, but his wife's name was Sati.
Parvati.
Sati.
Yeah, but also Parvati and Sati. Later they said Sati. So Parvati became Sati when she then sacrificed herself. She was so mad they didn't invite her husband because of her devotion, actually. So then he got mad. He came and picked up the corpse, and he was dancing with the corpse, holding it over his head. And he was angry, and he was going to destroy the entire universe. They were really scared. He was Rudra, you know, Rudra Shiva. And then they called Vishnu, who came and cut the body to pieces, which calmed him down. And all the pieces fell different places around the Himalayas and all around India and around the world, perhaps. And they became holy places for yogis later. But anyway, then he finally calmed down. Then he went somewhere to meditate. And then the gods were really scared because he was getting so much heat from meditating. They thought he would explode the whole universe. So then somehow, because they're divine, Sati or Parvati got reborn rather quickly by the same parents. She grew up and she became beautiful Uma. And her mother gave her the name Uma, which means, may she not suffer like she did in her previous life as our daughter, when my husband was rude to her husband. And so then they took him, they wanted to reintroduce her to Shiva so he would calm down and not destroy the universe. So they had a plot, and they got Cupid, whose name was Kama, and he sneak up on Shiva while he's meditating. Flames coming out of his third eye, and his eyes closed, meditating away. And then he was ready with a flower arrow. When you get shot with his arrow, then you fall in love with whoever you see. Become hopelessly in love. And then they brought beautiful 17-year-old, 18-year-old Uma to stand there where he would see her. And then later he would discover she was reincarnation of his previous, but never mind, just he would fall in love with her. So he knew that they were plotting this, and he opened his third eye and he incinerated Cupid. So that's why they call it Cupid, Anangapati, the Lord with no body. And they still can go around and shoot you with, but he doesn't have a body. So then she said, well, you guys don't know what you're doing. I'm going to take care of this. So she then went and sat on the nearby hilltop next to Shiva. And she did more asceticism than he could possibly think of, because she was more macho than him. And then they have beautiful poetry about how her beautiful body turned all like a drought, like the soil in a drought, and cracked skin, and she said shriveling breasts, and they combined kind of the erotic and the horrific in this amazing poetry. And so then he kind of notices that there's a woman who's meditating more macho than I am. What is this, you know? So then they start talking, and pretty soon he kind of sees, really, and then somehow she's not that wasted, and then he falls totally in love, and eventually she completely conquers his mind, and he becomes domesticated. And they make a lot of love on a lot of mountaintops, but after a while, it gets so bad that the snake that lives in his hair gets really sad at one point, and he says, oh, that Uma, she's driving me crazy, and she's complaining to Ganesha and to Kumara, the two kids, because Shiva and she and Uma are in their bower, and they're getting it on, you know, and the snake is cold outside with them. And he says, I hate that woman. She won't let Shiva make love to her until they play strip dice. And she always wins. And he has to take everything off. And he has to take a bath and wash off the ashes. And he has to take the snake off and put me outside, and I'm freezing. And so they say, oh, no, don't worry. He's fine. You know, there's a smoke hole in the house. And they don't really have a fire in there except the fire of their love for each other, their passion for each other. But when he gets wild, his third eye sends a flame up through the roof. So just coil yourself around the smoke hole, the chimney, and you'll be nice and warm. And so then Shiva's like that. So in other words, Shiva becomes totally domesticated, and he actually gets the name Shiva. And you know what Shiva means? Shiva means peace and luck. It doesn't mean anything destructive. And why is he peaceful and lucky? Because he's under control of his wife. That's the Indian story. Uma takes charge. Okay? So this is the difference. You see, this is why Bhakti and the Dharma are so connected. And I was just looking up this morning, knowing we were having this talk. My last graduate student, Guy Saint-Amand, which is presently at Princeton, and he wrote this book about the Shiva Purana, the Bhagavatam, and the Mahayana Sutras, the non-dual sutras. And that's when the guys who are all trying to get away from life, don't have a soul, don't do this, don't do that. I mean, the Upanishads also take away the soul, because they say your Atma is Paramatma. That's not your personal Atma, by the way. So that's like, you could say that's neti, na. Or as Krishna Das mimics dear Maharaj-ji saying, nay. That's what he has to say about your soul. That's if you think it's your personality, in other words. So that's what they were all doing in the Upanishadic time, Buddhists and so-called Vedists or Hindus. Then when they get to 500 years later or so, then suddenly they're all realizing a new vision of bhakti, where God loves you. He adores you. So, wow, you love him. Do you know what I mean? You're not going to love somebody who comes and wants to beat you up unless you offer 3 cows for a barbecue for them in the fire. That's not jolly. But someone who adores you, when your soul turns into a gopi, meaning a lover, and receives the blessing of that deity, and that's bhakti, and the Buddhist bhakti are the bodhisattvas, Tara, Avalokiteshvara, Manjushri, Saraswati, etc. Same deities as are the deities in Hindu, and they have a fierce Tara who is Kali for the guys who are too nasty, the ones who insist on trying to be the boss. So it's on that point that there is this complete beyond the isms. And Ram Dass totally realized that. And after all, Ram Dass he wasn't trans, but he was kind of a little bi. Do you know what I mean? He didn't have a toxic view of masculinity. And that's, in a way, you could say, Be Here Now, he wrote, after extremely high doses, where his male, I'm the best Harvard professor, I'm a psych guy, I'm a high achiever, I'm in my Mercedes convertible, picking guys and girls up on Mass Ave, and I'm a happy materialist. And then he turned into a saint. But Be Here Now was the bridge of it. And being here now is what your mom has to be when you're born, or you'd be dead. She's there now with you. And you're not that much fun, actually. You're a little fun. Do you know what I mean? When you're only nursing, then it's mother's gold. That's okay. Then later it's poop. And then someone has to clean it up. And then she has to feed you. And then when you're sick, she's going crazy. She's a total selflessness, actually. Her soul is selfless love, So this is where Buddhism and Bhakti meet, and it's not an ism. It's life. It's a life force. So, okay? And your Siddhi Ma, by the way, isn't she in the same field as Maharaj-ji? Although she would never say so.
Well, she never said so, but that was my experience of her.
He said so.
Exactly. But the people, they go for Maharaj-ji because they're going for the guy, because India still has patriarchal, right? Just like America. So we're doing something new in the movement coming from them all, both for Buddhism and for Bhakti and everything. And India did it. They have this thing that I've always bugging Katie to sing, which is what is it called? Jayadeva, written by Jayadeva. It's the one where Radha gets a little bit bugged.
Gita Govinda.
The what?
Gita Govinda. Gita Govinda.
Gita Govinda. Gita Govinda, is that what the name of the poem? Gita Govinda? Well, okay, yeah, right, Gita Govinda. And in that one, Radha is a little bit annoyed with Krishna. And that's where it starts. What is this Krishna? He's my guy, but he's running around with all these gopis. He has a gopi on every street corner. There's a gopi milking every cow and he's jumping on all of them. I don't want to see that guy. Of course, she does, totally. But she starts out being annoyed, and the universe is practically crumbling because the cosmic love between those two, sort of like in the Matrix, between Neo and Trinity, in the Matrix where Neo and Trinity, their love is like the energy of the whole thing. And so that whole story is then how Krishna begs her pardon, and she finally forgives him, right? And he indicates that these others are just his duplicates to make them happy, but he really remains in love with Radha. So that's why I'm doing a Buddhist bugging thing on all the kirtans. I want to see Jaya Ram, Jaya Radha, Jaya Sita. I feel that's important. Sita Ram, yes, we do Sita Ram. But we end up with Ram, Ram, Ram. We go Sita Ram, not Sita Sita.
Okay, we'll work on that one.
And that's what we need. We need, it's like Dalai Lama says, he wants to be reborn as a woman.
Okay, I'm glad you said
Hillary.
That. Did he say that?
We had Kamala Devi.
Did he say that?
Americans had to have a guy. Toxic guy.
But did His Holiness say...
What?
His Holiness did say that it's possible that the next Dalai Lama might
he would be a woman. Because he said, women are wiser. Women are smarter. When there's a problem in a crisis, women look for the peaceful way to deal with it. They emit oxytocin, which makes you look 360 degrees around for your allies and how to solve a situation in the maximally beneficial way. The guy in a crisis situation, charge, that's it. Smash. I mean, that's cortisol, the anger, that's the tendency, right? So we don't need that now. That's not life-enhancing anymore. We have nuclear weapons, We have unbelievable biological weapons. We have the oil weapon that is destroying the entire planet for charge and make money and have billions and bigger machines, and it's all hopeless. And the women know about day-to-day love and life. And they are not seeking to escape everything. They realize you have to take care of things, actually. And that's the beauty of non-dualism, by the way. Non-dualism means this is nirvana right here and now. Right now. You're all liberated. Maharaj-ji, that's why Maharaj-ji was totally attentive to every detail of people, what they were doing. I love it. After Larry Brilliant slept with the Dalai Lama, and they stopped the smallpox, he was freaking out because his wife wanted to stay with Maharaj-ji and he wanted to go be a doctor and have a career and be a guy, And then Maharaj-ji read his mind and stepped on his hand. And then he had never had his hand stepped on as a gesture of pure love. And his heart melted into Maharaj-ji's.
He didn't want to touch Maharaj-ji's feet. And that was one of the reasons. He said, I'm not getting it. So
okay, you can correct the detail. My point is, fine, whatever you like. Point is, he realized that something loved him, which he hadn't been able to find in that time, because the Western thing is the same. Western thing, God, except for a few mystics, God is fearsome. He threatens you with hell. He threatens with you to obey and do this and do that, Sends ice after you. Sends, like the bad ruler does, So the women are not like that, Mother Goddess is not like that. Goddess is mom. We almost had Hillary. We almost had Kamala. And we got one toxic male after another. And we are still not doing well. So that's Buddhism and Bhakti.
Go ahead.
Okay? And it's not an ism, it's just life. Okay. It's life. Do you know?
All right, I have one comment to get you to explore.
Okay.
When we're talking about
I'm glad.
Bhakti,
only one?
Only one.
More.
Well, I have one right now. When we're talking about Bhakti and we're talking about discriminating wisdom.
Yes.
So I think it needs a little bit of exploring in terms of somebody on the path and they found this love.
Yes.
They found, so many people through Krishna Das here. And they don't quite know. I actually had a couple of people come up and say, well, that movie helped explain a little bit of what this bhakti is and what the scene was like back then. So the discriminating wisdom part, to me, it's a really important ingredient, especially for people who are just finding their way through the bhakti path. Not to do the kinds of end-arounds that happen. All of us, have that kind of experience where we're not facing what is here and now for us, and we're using love, bhakti, dualism, shall we say, to not address what is going on with us and what needs to be addressed with a little bit of discriminating wisdom.
Well, discriminating wisdom, when used fully, realizes that things like the caste system are just arbitrary. They don't make them absolute things. which was the problem India had, and still has actually, and which we also have here, but we have it with money, billionaires and others. And that's a discriminating wisdom, if it really discriminates, ends up in non-duality, totally. And once it ends up in non-duality, then you have to be here now. And if being here now is the absolute, there's no other absolute to go escape to, and the divinity comes to be here now with you, then when you're stuck here, what's the logical thing to do that discriminated wisdom tells you to do if you're here now? It tells you to make now and here the best it can possibly be for you and everybody else. So therefore, instead of turning your sort of absolute reality drive into get the hell out of here now, because it's a hopeless situation, that absolute reality drive is into being here now in the best way. And what is the best way to be here now? It's to love Raghu. It's to love Nina. It's to love Maharaj-ji. It's to love everything here now and make it beautiful and make it the best and be as beautiful and as best as you can be. Because that's absolute. That's the way to be nirvana now. If you're less than that and this sucks now, what's the point of being here now? Get the hell out. Right? And that's what people are doing, you see. And when they don't really realize that this is the infinite, this is the absolute, Krishna is here, call him, and Bhakti is the super caste destroying Indian historical discovery, because suddenly with the mass of the peasants, the servant people under the high caste people couldn't even go to the Vedic ritual. They couldn't go to church. They couldn't come to the retreat center. They had to get out there and cook and serve and be the servants and the slaves. And they luckily weren't really slaves. They were just kind of serfs. And suddenly with Bhakti, everybody can contact the divine directly just by loving them. They didn't have to go and hire a professional to go and do a Vedic mantra, They could just love God and God loved them. And that was India's mass delivery of spirituality and membership and love and happiness and gentleness and tenderness. And Krishna is so tender. He treats his devotee like a man does it to a lover, a divine man to a divine lover. And finally, he ends up seeing the divinity of his beloved, not just an instrument of his own pleasure. And that, by bhakti, everyone in India has access to that, however lowly they are. And that was not the ancient system at all, right? So that's where they meet. And bhakti becomes, and so no one, the monks, really what monks are a social engineering institution invented actually by Mahavira Buddha, invented in India. And what is it engineering? It's getting the crazy guys to be less militaristic. So it takes the militancy of the male into conquer yourself instead of conquering other people. So that's why the women didn't really need it so much, because they were less self-centered than the guys in general. And therefore, when the guys rule the world, like they've been doing for 2,500 years, they are running it into the ground. Aren't we?
But didn't the women also have less accessibility to spiritual teachings and practices?
And they even say that crap. Absolutely. That's totally wrong. They even say there's no women in the Pure Lands. There's no women in the Brahma heaven, Brahma Kaiga, because women would make it impure, the realm of pure form, and that's totally false. If there's no women, there's no men. Those gods are bi. They are bi-gendered. They're ungendered. So this is the radical thing we are at this time in history, which Ram Dass led us toward. Maharaj-ji tamed Ram Dass, or rather he tamed Richard Alpert, and between them working together, they created Ram Dass. And I don't know, Raghu, what your name was, but you got tamed and you're running around serving others. You wanted to do service. and you want to improve the world, and that's what they want you to do. And how many times did Maharaj-ji have to send Larry Brilliant off to do smallpox that he didn't want to have to do?
A lot of times,
Exactly.
6 or
So
8.
actually, Maharaj-ji is the one who saved the world from smallpox, actually, by forcing Larry Brilliant to do that. And but he doesn't really get credit for that. He just gets credit for being a jolly guru with a blankie.
Well, actually, in the movie that we watched, in the film that we watched earlier today about K.K. Shah, do you all remember that K.K. said that it's unfortunate that people project their own personal relationship on Maharaj-ji, and they forget what Maharaj-ji did for the masses. Do you remember that?
Let me say one other thing. Soul, S-O-U-L, soul. Dalai Lama and I, around the same time, started giving license to soul, because you understand it when you look into the subtle teaching of Tantra. It is called Chitta Santana, the continuum. Even the Theravada people, like the Burmese, those are all from the dualistic Buddhism, that tradition. And from those people, they talk about Chitta Santana, the continuation of the mind. And they all have continuation of mind because they don't want to be lumped in with the Charvakas from early Pali, whatever level you want. And so they have to have a soul because something gets reborn, and that's what it is. And what it is a super subtle continuum, something down at the level of the DNA, RNA. But the big, great difference from the Western thing is it's like personal, it's yours. It's Raghu's own soul. It's not somebody else's, some species, human species, little like Pac-Man gene that you're just carrying some genes, and then after you dump them and you have some babies, then you're useless. That's a Western materialistic thing. But it's not. It's like your own gene. And it goes as a gene, it goes like it zooms along, and it thinks it has a body like you do in a dream when you think you have a body. But your body is like unconscious, right? And yet you're running around in the dream. And so that happens after you don't have the body anymore. But then you used to have it. Once then you go find a body. But in order to find a body, if you like being a human, you have to find a nice mom. And she's there with her discriminating wisdom. And she says, that guy, Raghu Das, he was a weird coal miner in previous life. And this life, I want to make a Raghu Das who's going to go and be a Bhakti-wala. So then when I do my discriminating wisdom, which women can do with their cells, not just with their head, and then they do 3D printing, and they create an embodiment for somebody. Just like, you can make with 3D printing, you can make a plastic gun to go and assassinate somebody. It's a complicated mechanism. Look at that mechanism that you made.
Okay.
Okay.
I just want to say one thing, though. When you talk about this journey of the soul in this way,
yes,
it feels, unless there is a path of evolution.
Yes, there is a path of
right?
evolution.
But if we've all been a mother to each other,
yes,
why is it then that we don't carry with us that evolved quality?
Who says we don't?
I'm asking you. If you've been a mother to somebody, if all the men in this room have been a mother to somebody, why is it that that's forgotten in this body?
Put it this way. The human thing is, the reason human beings are so amazing is that we are so totally transformable and malleable. A saint can become a serial killer. A serial killer can become a saint. We have good and bad potential. So it's a matter of guidance and self-guidance, ultimately. And we create systems of education. That's why education is everything. Education means bringing out of someone their deepest wisdom of their own life force, their deepest energy. Educare in Latin means to lead out. It doesn't mean plant something in there. It means to lead out of them something. It really fits beautifully with shiksha, with the Sanskrit word. And so the human is very transformable, and we can identify with lots of other people. And actually, when you become a Buddha or God, Krishna says, for example, in the Gita, he says, well, I'm everybody. I'm the bad guys and the good guys. I'm all of the beings, he says. So that means that he's open to that all. And it doesn't mean that, and therefore he doesn't even give up on the bad guys. Sometimes maybe the demon needs to be taught in a new body because the old one can't listen or is like spastic or something, whatever. And so sometimes there is a change the demon, and actually they leave that up to the ladies. Actually, they usually call Durga or Kali to get rid of the really bad ones, because the male again it's not got the wisdom to know which is right. And so you're magnifying to where you know you're everyone, and then you can get a life where you can get misled in the wrong direction. You're abused and traumatized and miseducated, and you get shut in yourself, and then you flail madly and harm people and do things. And that's what those people are doing.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you, Raghu. Thank you, Raghu.